God, whom we know by many names, whom many of us know as the Holy One. We give you thanks for drawing us together tonight. We thank you for the opportunity to come, to open our hearts to each other, to open our minds, to learn more about how other people understand you, how other people understand spirituality. And we come together tonight in the name of those who were victims. We come praying for those who are enemies, for those who would seek their own ends by violent means. We come praying that through us and through so many others who gather to understand better each other and you, that you would make us a force for peace that is more powerful than anything that comes against us. So we open ourselves tonight to the gifts that you have for us. Amen.
There's a story told about Alfred Nobel, who we're all familiar with, who's the one who endowed not only the Nobel Peace Prize, but many different prizes throughout history. What people aren't aware, though, is the backstory. It's told that one day he woke up, and it was the day after, actually, his brother, Ludwig, had passed away. But rather than see an obituary for his brother, he saw an obituary for himself. And in the obituary, it stated, unfortunately, the purveyor of dynamite, the doctor of death, which is where he made most of his money, Alfred Nobel, has passed away. In that one moment when he looked on his life and thought about how he was going to be remembered, he radically changed his life. He realized at that moment that it wasn't just sufficient to be involved in his business, but at that moment he decided to endow the Nobel Prizes that we experience today. I'm in the midst right now of writing a book that relates to the following phenomenon, not necessarily seeing our own obituary, but thinking about our own mortality. Regardless of our face, many times we may walk out of a funeral, and we have a moment where we say to ourselves, I hope they speak about me the way they spoke about that person. You leave, and for about 15 minutes, you think you want to lead a better life. And then all of a sudden, you get distracted by your cell phone, your iPod, and you get involved in business as usual until that next moment of awakening. So the concept behind the book is called, What Will They Say About You When You're Gone? You begin the book by writing your own obituary. And then I take you on a journey, 7 principles for reverse engineering your life, so you lead the life now that you want to be remembered for. I would have to say that for many of us, and for me personally, there is nobody in this room that hasn't experienced a moment when we've thought about what's truly important. One of the people that I interviewed for the book was Mayor Giuliani. I'm writing the book right now. And we talked about what our country was like on September 12th. On September 12th, there was tremendous unity in the country. People were kinder. People hugged their children a little bit tighter. And he said, Rabbi, I see the problem, but I'm not sure what the solution is. How do we lead a life with a higher sense of frequency, with a higher sense of purpose, and harness those moments for personal growth? I thought about this personally, and then I'll be turning to the panelists to share their reflections. When I entered my 40s, my mom passed away from a brain aneurysm when she was 44 years old. And when I entered my 40s, I always thought, well, she's so old, although I didn't know it, but I thought about the fragility of life and how in one moment, our lives could be radically changed. And how do we lead lives that are filled with a greater sense of connection to our dreams, to the people that we love, and lead a life of greater legacy? So tonight's panel really is an opportunity to explore, I believe, a phenomenon that really crosses all denominations. What kind of personal experiences have we had that have awakened us to these moments? What have we witnessed? And as Kate said, this doesn't necessarily have to be a sad occasion. It could be, by the way, when you come back from the doctor and you're going for a test, and you're praying and hoping that everything comes out okay. And then, boom, everything's fine. Could be at a wedding. It could be at a celebration where we feel we're leading our lives at a higher sense of awareness. how do different faiths experience those moments? And how do different faiths harness those moments? So that not just passing experiences, and then at the end of our lives we say, wait a second, what did I do with all of my time? William Penn made the following statement that I think in many ways encapsulates this. He said, I expect to pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness or abilities that I can show to any fellow creature, let me do it now. Let me not defer it or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. In the Jewish faith, there's an idea that it's important to always remember the day of our death. And we do that through prayers. We do that through living, as Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said, live life with radical amazement. Don't live life casually. Live it with a sense of gratitude and excitement, and then we'll really lead lives of greater fulfillment. Tonight we're blessed to have 3 stellar clergy members. I think they deserve another big round of applause. It's supposed to be a little upbeat here. And it's really an honor to share this with you tonight. And we've asked each one of them to share first a 5-minute reflection on this phenomenon in their lives, whether it's personally, what they've witnessed, how their faiths address it. And then we have a number of specific questions I'm going to ask you. So I'd first like to begin with Dr. Adeeb, and he's going to share some reflections now.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for being here. I would like to follow up with you that in our Islamic tradition, we have a parable that says a guy got a word that he's going to die in a week. And he has 3 most important friends, so he went to see them. He went to the first friend. He said, listen, I'm going to die in a week. What will you do for me? He said, the moment you die, I'll leave you. What do you mean you leave me? I spent all my time seeing you grow, taking care of it. I'm sorry. I will leave you. He went to his second friend. He said, listen, I'm going to die in a week. What will you do for me? He said, well, I'll walk you to the funeral and then see you buried and leave. What do you mean? I've taken care of you and you are sick. I took you to the hospital, sent you to school, whatever it is. I'm sorry. He went to the third person. He said, you're my friend. I'm going to die. What will you do for me? He said, well, I cannot prevent you from dying, and don't expect me to die with you. But I will try to make people remember you. So who are these 3 friends? The first one is his money. The moment he dies, it becomes an estate. The second is his family. They walk him to the grave, and then they go back. The third are his action and deeds in life, what he has done. When you say how you want people to remember you, it's your action. You can work for it. I've had many, many instances in my life, and my life has been very rich, and I was honored to become the president of the board of the Interfaith Council. I think I'm the first Muslim in the history of this country to head such a dignified organization. But I am here, and when I kind of tried to remember my life, I thought nothing happened with my will. Everything was destined. I was sent to a Catholic school, so I studied catechism for 12 years. Then I was born Muslim. Then I came to this country. I'm writing a book right now, like you, Rabbi, and I'm going to call it East Embraces West. Because they say East and West never get together. No, East embraces West. I could see myself as an Eastern person from Lebanon coming to this country and making headline and being successful and making a lot of friends where people respect you. And in my life, there were 3 times where I flirted with death. There were 3 attempts on my life. And after that, I was focusing. Why would this happen? The last thing that happened to me was, last December, I was taken to the hospital. And let me say before that, my daughter was gravely ill. And I always do interfaith service in Wilton. And David Graybill, who was the pastor at the Wilton Presbyterian Church, called me and said, Kareem? I said, yes, David. He said, what's your daughter's name? I said, Rhonda. He said, do you have a problem for us Christians praying for her? I said, listen, as far as I'm concerned, God has 3 mailboxes. One has the Star of David, one has the cross, one has the crescent. Let's flood all 3 of them. unless some of them has a hole in it. And he said, I'm going to use it. I said, what is your feeling? I said, my feeling as an engineer, which I am, God gave me my daughter, he could take her back anytime. But as a faithful person, I think she'll make it. That was 15 years ago. She made it. She got married. She made me a grandfather. So what I try to say is that religion without spirituality is no religion. Religion has to have spirituality. And I've always given, as an engineer, the example of spirituality as a cone. The higher you grow in spirituality, the smaller is the section of the cone. So at the bottom, if you have no spirituality, the rabbi is on the other side, and the reverend is on the other side, and Inni is on the other side. I don't see them. But once we all move upward towards the divine, we start seeing each other. We find out that we have the same goal, the same objective. We're following various paths, but they lead us always to the ultimate divine, to the ultimate spiritual peak that we all seek. So it's very important to realize that if I'm a Muslim, it's an accident of birth. He's Jewish, it's an accident of birth. Should I criticize somebody who God made him the way he is, created him like that? Should I be that intolerant? I don't like to say I am tolerant of you, because tolerance means that, like you tolerate poison up to a point. I don't want to be tolerant of you. I want to embrace you. This is more dynamic. This is more positive. This is more interactive. I want us to say that we are Muslim brothers, Christian brothers, but above all, we are humans. And if somebody can tell me if Adam was Jewish or Christian or Hindu or Sikh or Muslim, I would love to hear that. The brotherhood of humanity is what brings us together. Let's not forget that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to echo one point that you made, I think the fact that we're all here tonight, and regardless of our faiths, we seek that meaning. We seek that divine. And these are moments that awaken us, is precisely what you expressed so beautifully. So thank you. Now I'd like to ask Inni to share a few words.
Good evening, everyone. Firstly, I want to get the record straight. I am not part of the clergy. In our faith, the Sikh faith, we have no clergy. So I answer questions to you based on a person who is part of a congregation who has chosen, made a decision to practice the Sikh faith. Yes, I speak about the faith, but I have no title because we have no titles. The path to the divine is between you and the divine. There is no one in between to guide you. We have what we call for the faithful. For the faithful is the people of the faith. We have our scripture, which we revere as the Guru. That is our wisdom. That is our guiding light. And we seek solace, comfort, advice, everything from that. And our relationship is to the Guru. With the Guru guides, it's the divine light. We truly believe that the divine is within you, and that divine light, you are a spark of divine light, and that divine light is in all. And that divine light is the same. So I take a little offense here with Kareem, if I may, when he says, we're all brotherhood. Hello, sisterhood? Just want to make sure about that. Now you talk about experiences of when did you feel the crisis in your faith, or moments when you felt you were challenged, or what you felt was there were things out of control and you just felt you were being railroaded or whatever. I think in my life there were two events. It was the events in 1984 when the Indian government stormed the Golden Temple in Amritsar. I was at the age 27, living in the United States, totally clueless, I would say clueless. But when the military stormed into the most, I won't call it sacred, historically significant place of the Sikhs, of people of my faith, that is when I woke up. And I said, when somebody is out to exterminate you, when somebody is out, when an entity, it doesn't matter who it is out to exterminate you, you better know who you are. And that was a turning point for me. And I went deeper into my faith to establish a connection and to also understand what is it that they fear. It was very important for me. And the second time it happened was 9/11. 9/11 for me was tragic, because as an American, my country was attacked. But there was no period of mourning, because in that same breath, within an hour, I received a phone call from my daughter's school, my 6th grade. The principal of the school called that, please come and get your daughter. She's crying unconsolably, she needs to come in. I went in, picked her up. This is a child born and raised in America, was born at Bridgepost Hospital. And she said, Mom, I said, what's the matter? She said, all my friends said, go home. I said, go home where? It was the color of her skin. So we had no period of mourning. We were already in, and at 9/11, I decided at that point that I needed to work with the broader community. And from working within the community, I started working outside the community. And those were the two events in my life that have shaped me, drive me, and continue to do whatever I do.
Thank you very much. That's a wonderful example of taking that moment and in a very concrete way, enabling it to continue to inspire you. So thank you very much for sharing.
I must be the rookie because I brought notes with me. It's been my observation and experience as well that that moments of awakening open our souls up, often wide open to God and to each other if we allow them to. And they have the power as well to deepen us. They are redemptive opportunities as well, and I think that all depends on how we respond to them. My father's recent death left my own soul wide open. And it was both a deeply painful and yet a powerfully beautiful experience in my journey of faith when I discovered myself waist deep in the presence of God, overwhelmed by a sense of His peace and His comfort. The term I have chosen is I felt during that period cocooned by God. And a text from the Hebrew Scriptures meant a lot to me during that period. It's from Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 20, and it says, cling to God, or other translations render this, hold fast to God, because He is your life. And in the past, I thought of my tendencies during times of crisis, or times of grief, or times of stress. My tendency was to do one of several things. Either retreat, isolate myself, live in denial, or quite frankly, go into some form of the fetal position. And this time, I hung on to God for dear life and discovered wonderfully that His promises were true and not just abstractions anymore. That I tell my parishioners when they're going through their own crisis that God is with you. I actually experienced it. I lived it. That awakening where I discovered that God is indeed with us. The psalmist says, if you go up to the heights, He's with you. But also, if you go down into the depths, he's with you as well, because there's nowhere you can ever go or any situation you can ever find yourself in this lifetime where you can flee from God's Spirit. In fact, I like to say that the reason that we hear in the Scriptures so often God saying to us, I'm with you, I'm with you, I'm with you, saying it over and over again, because I think he needs to remind us, because we so often forget when life gets difficult. I think awakenings can remind us powerfully and profoundly as well of the brokenness of our world, but also, again, that God is with us in the brokenness. Let me finish by just referencing a book that also has influenced me a bit. It's entitled Windows of the Soul. It was written by a guy named Ken Geyer. And he came up with a concept that's meant a lot to me over the years. It's the idea that there are windows in this lifetime where we meet God. And what I liked about the book was that many of them are outside the box of our conventional sacred spaces and places. Houses of worship, scripture, prayer, meditation. And so we can be surprised by them, these places of awakening. He included places like forests and movies, pieces of poetry and works of art, books and tears where we suddenly find ourselves surprised by the presence of God with us. And one of the places where God meets us, he also says, is in our pain, in our crisis. And so in our Christian tradition, we believe that God weeps with us because Jesus can fully identify with all of our human suffering. I also believe that awakenings are when God's Spirit is trying to stir something within us. And this thought is expressed wonderfully in Frederick Buechner's book, Whistling in the Dark. And this thought has stayed with me, these couple lines over the years. Let me just share it with you in conclusion. He writes, whenever you find tears in your eyes, especially unexpected tears, it's well to pay the closest attention to them. They are not only telling you something about the secret of who you are, but more often than not, God is speaking to you through them of the mystery of where you come from, and he is summoning you to where, if your soul is to be saved, you should go next. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What Greg shared about the notion that God comes to us and says, I'm with you, because we need to be reminded, really speaks in many ways, I think, to in our faith right now, we're in the midst of getting ready for the holiday of Rosh Hashanah, where we have the sound of the shofar. And the whole notion there is really about, in whatever faiths, there are these moments when God calls us, tries to shake us out of our slumber, as Maimonides says, to say, I'm here, open up, listen. For me, and I just want to share a reflection, then I'll ask the question, which is, how do we, because I think everyone shared different specific days or events in their lives when they were awakened, how do we maintain that sense of living with a sense of urgency and living with a sense of mission and purpose, so that it's not just those few times, but we're living with that every day? One of the principles that I've thought about, and I'd like to hear from you, what strategies you have, is what I call discovering your Elijah moment. Elijah is a prophet who sometimes appears in history, according to Jewish tradition, to be there at a moment when you feel that you need a hand. I call it in the book the standing room only phenomenon. Many times you go to a funeral and you'll have people that are standing against the wall. If you could ask the deceased, they probably would not even remember who that person was. If you ask members of the family, they also would have no idea who they are. But because of one moment in time, when that person did an act of kindness for that individual, their lives were transformed. And I speak about one of the ways to live with a sense of urgency is to realize we can be an Elijah every day. It happened to me last year. I found God in the Starbucks Ridgeway last 9/11. I was listening to CBS 880 radio, And there was a police officer in New York City who was describing the fact that he was thrilled that somebody came over to him and gave him a $20 bill and said, I'm giving you something today because I want you to know on 9/11 how much I appreciate the New York City Police Department does. So I'm in my car with my coffee, and I say to myself, I could just drive away, or maybe today, 9/11, I could try the Starbucks pay it forward experiment. So I decided to go back in, and I said to the cashier, I'd like to pay for the next person. And there's great studies, that leads to others. So I'm standing on the side, and a guy gets his free coffee, and he says, it was really nice that you paid for the coffee. Why'd you do it today? I said, well, today's 9/11. He said, I want you to know that means so much because I was at ground zero on 9/11. And I said, what were you doing at ground zero? He said, I'm a retired New York City Police Department officer. And here this was in Stamford, Connecticut, literally a moment's notice, where I felt I discovered Elijah and was able to lead a life of greater impact and meaning. So I'd like to ask you just to reflect on strategies within your faith or things that you personally do to try to make sure that you live in the present, in the moment, and try to make sure you're always leading a life of impact. We'll start backwards. Greg.
Our belief is that to get to the place where we consistently extend kindness, live lives of love, care, compassion, requires that we are inspired by the Holy Spirit. And that means that living a life of prayer where we are, technically to be inspired is to be inspirited, where the Spirit comes to dwell in us and then produces in us what we refer to as the fruit of the Spirit. And I like to say that we get to the point where we feel like we can't even help ourselves, that we get so full of a sense of God's love and His compassion, His peace, His kindness, that we then go out and need to share it. So it really starts for us in the relationship with God and then flows out of us, or I like to say the overflow of that extends out wherever we go.
Inni.
So I need to just touch base on something because we're hearing God, 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 He. And, with all due respect, the God in the Sikh tradition is gender neutral. The God in the Sikh tradition is non-judgmental, is loving. So we don't have an entity outside us. The divine is within us, and you are a part of that divine light. You are divine. You are a spark of divine light. The connection becomes, how do you connect to that divinity within you? So you live in that presence. You try to live in that consciousness. You try to live where your every action is divine-oriented. So therefore, simple things. If you are a spark of divine light, then therefore this tongue is part of the divine. And therefore what you speak, be careful. What you hear, be careful. These hands are made to serve. You live in that consciousness constantly. How do you do it? For me, I have what we call the command, which comes out of Golden Temple every day. I listen to it on my computer. And that, to me, is my thought for the day. That drives my day. And I'm constantly aware of it. But more than that, it is the constant reminder that I am a spark of divine light. And so is the person across me. So I better be careful with what I say, what I do. The earth, the ground that I walk on, is part of the divine light. It's a grave at every moment. Be careful how you tread. So that is living in the consciousness. That is living with the presence. And that is what drives drives me to live in that moment, in that divine, in that presence, that there is something higher or there is a connection. And it's about me. It's all about me. Because if I live with that presence, I become a gentler person. It makes me feel better. I know when I don't do that. I know when there is a thought which is foreign, which I consider, which is not kind. I quickly say, where did that come from? Because you are in that moment. So that for me is the way.
Thank you. I felt, by the way, as you were talking, that I was thinking of Jewish thought as well, because I think it's fascinating, this notion of, God gave you eyes, so make sure you use your eyes properly. Your tongue, use it properly. Your ears, and that sense of really just seeing, and this is an idea we express actually at Yom Kippur. At the very end of the Day of Atonement, we say, God, I am not guilty of theft. So the commentators say, why are you saying at the end of the Day of Atonement, I'm not guilty of theft? So the idea that's given is that everything that we have is truly on loan from God. And if we see our lives as being on loan every day, then in many ways we have to make sure that we sanctify those gifts and not waste them. So thank you. My friend.
In Islam, we have a saying, Kun ma'allah tarallah ma'ak. Be with God, you'll find God is with you. When I lead every prayer, when I ask people to stay in line, I finish by saying, think of this prayer as your last. This will shake it shakes everybody. Like it could be your last, It's very important to understand also that in Islam, God is not he and is not she. In the Quran, God sometimes it says I, sometimes says he, sometimes says we. And this to emphasize that there is no gender. As far as myself, I had all imams in all mosques. They are monitored by the Homeland Security, which we know and we understand that. And they come to me and I know them. We have become very friends. They visit me at home. Said, do you mind if we come and listen to your sermons? I said, I don't at all. They said, why? Because I know that God is observing me. So if you observe me, if I try to please him, I'm not going to do anything else. So what I do is that in every endeavor I do, whenever I have to make a decision, would it please God or not? Would it please God or not? As far as seeing, you have to have the light of spirituality to see even objective things. For example, material things. You see this wall? It's there not because you see it. It's there because there is light on it. If you walk in the darkness, you're going to bump your head against it. You don't see it. So the light comes from God, and said God is the light of the universe. Allahu nur as-samawat wal ard. God is the light of the universe and of the earth. This is what drives me all the time. And sometimes, at one point, I remember we're going through a hard time, and my wife said, listen, I'm not going to have this woman to come and clean the home because we don't have the money. I said, listen, the money that is going to be paid to her has been decided by God. It's her sustenance. You're going to be the mean. Are you going to deprive yourself of the benefit of being the mean? She said, okay, I'll get her. And the next day, somebody who didn't pay me, just pay me, because you have to collect your invoices and what have you. So to me, God speaks to us, to all of us. Are we listening? Are we listening? God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. We can listen twice as much as we talk. Some behave like they have umpteen mouth and half an ear. So listen to God. God speaks to you in everything you see. The beauty of the universe, the animals, a kingdom, the color of the flower. You see God everywhere, within you and outside. And God says, I'm going to show you my signs over the horizon and within yourselves. When you look at the human body, it's really a perfectly engineered body or system. So what I do is that try to please God and don't listen to how people would judge you. And last thing, when I make an effort to do something, some people say, would I succeed or no? And if I don't succeed, I'm not going to take it. In our religion, God rewards you on the basis of the effort. The results are in his hands, not in yours. So you make the effort. If it's meant to be, it happens. It's not meant to be, doesn't happen. But at least you have to do your best every time. Thank you.
A number of things you said. He said, we believe about effort and not necessarily the destination. Totally a Jewish concept as well, I think in all of our faiths. This notion of da lifnei mi ata omed, which means in English, know before whom you stand.
When you say something Islamic is Jewish, they come from the same source. God does not contradict himself.
We all come
It's
from the
us
same
that don't-
God.
You see, the problem with us is that we have the words of God trying to be understood by the finite human mind.
Yeah.
When you try to understand the word, there is no discrepancy among all religions. They come from the same source, and God does not contradict himself, period.
Yep, and tonight was a great night to try to see that commonality.
But we're going to invite you to break into groups of 8, about 8 people each, and if possible, as much as possible, balance them by religious tradition. So we had the big 3 Abrahamic traditions, and then I'm afraid everybody who fell into one of the non-Abrahamic just got an N. And that's a whole lot of traditions and none. That N can also stand for none, because there's a lot of people that go, I don't know. I like to be around this stuff to explore it, but I'm not a person of faith. Your group leaders have the questions that we are going to invite you to discuss. It's so wonderful to feel this buzz of people connecting and talking. So, facilitators, could you give us 1 or 2 brief highlights of what you shared without sharing anybody's personal stories? Just kind of what stood out from your conversation?
I think the striking thing was that we were talking about prayer, but it's people. And people can make problems, and people can solve problems. And as we come together to try to find some understanding, that it's people relating to one another, to making community, trying to build community, and demonstrating in the face of all kinds of circumstances how we care for one another. So it's really, how do we build a family that is defined in a broader way than we conventionally do it.
It was very interesting. We didn't take any notes because we were so busy talking. And it was not as diverse maybe as some of the other groups. It was basically one Muslim, me with Jewish, the rest of the group was Jewish. But we, which is something that I'm interested in because our religions are very much like each other. The one thing that a lot of people said was that death of a loved one or someone in their family is the most profound experience that they've been through. Death happens to all of us. Doesn't matter what religion we identify with.
Our common ground was everyone experienced a very extreme life experience. And out of that extreme experience came some kind of naked clarity, something that each of us had to do. And rather than paraphrasing it, I'd just like to quote what some of us said. I hope you don't mind. There was an incredible outpouring here. I didn't change my job or do anything dramatic like that. I just became a better person. At the funeral, I realized I was not doing the work that I was meant to do. My mother became ill. I was the oldest. There were 4 of us. I took care of her. I became my mother. The continuity and the cycle of life, birth to death, the naming of my child after her grandmother who had just passed in the Ashkenazi Jewish religion, really actually just passing the spirit and the torch of life.
We had some people that were born a religion and just felt that's what they were going to do for the rest of their life, and nothing really changed what they were doing in that way. There were others that moved from, in a sense, having been to the Soviet Union and growing up there, moved from very materialistic to religious. They learned not from their family background, but from within themselves, that they wanted to learn more and more about their religion, which was Judaism. And then there was someone there who actually, as a teenager, gave up religion altogether, didn't want organized religion, but recently, fairly recently, came back because of a near-death experience that showed her that God was with her, and she feels that God will always be with her. And then, of course, there's the those people that were very much affected by September 11th, and our friends of the Sikh community that felt it was very, very important for them to reach out to the broader community, be it the Council of Churches and Synagogues, their local Norwalk community, or Greater Fairfield County, and teach people about who they are. And even though they're wearing the turban, that they're who they are. And that made a big impact in what they're doing in up until and including now. I think I got almost everybody. We had people, of course, that had people in their lives, friends that died very, very young, and that, of course, makes an impact on them. But it was always been an interesting experience to hear from others from different faith groups.
So to help people do better, because we all can do better, or to help some of the people who need more help in doing better, say the 5% or 10% of the world who, don't love others as they should, what would you suggest that we do to get people to do better?
You cannot love if you don't become love. So when you radiate love, the other person responds. So really, the burden lies on us. Let's not worry about what the other people are doing. It's you. You have to radiate love. You have to become love. You have to become, we have this idea which we say, oh, I do a lot of service. Really? Really? You become service. It's not that you are doing it. So you doing something is you're separating that. There is no separation. Love is no separation. Service is no separation. When you connect with your divinity, in that consciousness, whatever you do is divine-like. So if each one of us thinks like that, you can change the world. But if you're going to tell someone, you got to love somebody and really do this, it's not going to work. My 2 cents.
I usually tell people that the difference between animals and humans, we have the same bodies, the same functions, but we have a brain, we have a mind, and we have a tongue. We talk. If you don't use your brain, you are ungrateful to God. It's a gift from God that you don't use, especially for students that go on drugs or alcohol or something. If you don't use your tongue to bring people together, to be kind, to say kind words, you're ungrateful to God also. Bring everything back to God, like you try to please God. And I was thinking, as a comment, Rabbi, what would people think of me after I die? This is to me secondary to what God will think of me after I die when I meet him. This is the accountability. And if I do that, I'm sure people will think very nicely of me. So just tell them that it's in you. All you have to do is exploit your potential, fulfill your potential. Everybody can make it. That's how they could become better in finance, in studying, in spirituality, in everything, not only in spirituality. Because life is a whole. It's not a la carte. You pick up something. You're good all over. It's a menu.
I just want to make a point. I mentioned early on that I had Ernie DiMattia's memory in mind. I also have Rabbi Joseph Ehrenkranz, who was a pillar in this community and one who believed very strongly in the significance of interfaith work. And one of his phrases from the Talmud that he would share a lot, he said that when you act, you need to make sure your actions are both pleasing to God and pleasing to man simultaneously. That's not always easy, but I think that's the way really to bring people closer. And in the Abrahamic spirit, there's a kind of running, it's not necessarily a joke, but they said if you want to bring somebody closer to Judaism, invite them for Friday night dinner. Just bring somebody, be kind. And that's a way really to exude the spirit. Greg, you got to have a final word here. I know all we're not going to answer, but you got to say something.
Yeah, one of our scriptures in John's epistle says that God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. And what it suggests to us is that God is the source of love. And as I suggested earlier, the goal for us is to remain connected to God, remain in a place where he fills our life with his love. He's the source. and then we go and share it with others.
How would you connect with the youth? Sort of general question, but a way to bring them in, to teach them, to be kind to them. How would you connect with them, and what would be a way that someone could just reach out to those who are in need and are young?
I'll just throw out one idea that I think about. For me, actually, I think about this memory or moment of awakening as one that inspired me. When I was a young boy growing up in Atlanta in the 1970s, I remember at the time there was a struggle, what's called the struggle for Soviet Jewry. They weren't able to practice their faith. And I still remember to this day holding my father's hand and going to a rally, what's called for Soviet Jewry. And I always felt, and I think when you talk about youth, they have to feel, as I felt, and we all do, they're part of the mission, part of the process. When you can say to a young child that I need your support, it's not just you're on the receiving end, but we're counting on you. There's much you can give to the world. I find in many ways that's a way to inspire them to be motivated as well.
One of the more effective ways to connect with youth, at least in my experience, has been actually through involvement in the community with them. And so I pastored a church in Northwest Ohio before I came here, and at the same time I also helped coach the varsity football team. So I was pastor of the church and the coach. I actually liked the fact that most people knew me more as Coach Dahl than Pastor Dahl. It was a wonderful way to develop relationships with those outside the church. I've done the same thing here. So I help out a little bit with the Darien High School football team a couple days a week. But I was telling Kate, I have 3 young kids. And so I think at this point I'm at team number somewhere around 35 teams that I've coached. I'm on the Darien Little League board. I coach virtually every season one team. And I think it's a wonderful way to invest time in young people, to demonstrate you care about them by just giving them your time. But it's also a great opportunity to mentor them. And there we model love for them. We model kindness for them, and they see it and they respond to it.
So not being in the clergy role in the Sikh community, and we don't have that. It's been, so how do you motivate the youth and how do you connect with the youth? It's trust. If they trust you, you have them for life. Because they go through their cycles of everything. But if they trust you, they come to you. You know, and that's been my experience. I mean, I've been a camp counselor. I'm now a grandmother of I don't know how many grandchildren, because all my children have had babies, and these are the children that I went to, you know, where I was working as a counselor, not working, volunteering. But trust is probably the only thing, and that stability in their life, when their lives are going through great ups and downs, if you are that one person that they can lean on, even if it's just a phone call, when they feel nobody else is listening to them, and if you can be that listening board, you have them.
To motivate people, make an effort to understand them. And I'll give you an example out of real life. My wife is a French teacher at Basic High School in Bridgeport. 3 years ago, she said, I have this girl. She comes and sleeps in the class. I send her to the administration, and nothing is happening. I said, you bother to ask her why she's sleeping in class? She said, no. I said, you know she is sleeping, but you don't know why. I know the sun rises from the east and goes to the west. I know, but I understand that the sun is not moving. It's the earth that is moving. So try to understand that. So she came the next day, she was crying. So what happened? She said, I asked her, why are you sleeping? She said, I couldn't sleep at night yesterday. She said, why not? She said, I have no mattress at home. And I said, why are you shaking like this? She said, I didn't have breakfast. She said, what do you like to have? She said, I like hamburgers. She took her, although it's a risk in her car, to a next place. And she had a small burger, small French fries, small Coke. She took them, put them in her bag. And I said, why, aren't you hungry? She said, yes, but I have a small sister. I like to share it with her. This girl has the potential to be a success. And 3 years ago, she is doing brilliant work right now. So what you have to do, at your part, Try to understand, even if people are bad to you, they insult you, they bother you, try to understand why. And if you do that, you're on the right track. Then you're making this effort to meet them, to understand them. And they would love you, they would trust you. And she's telling her everything. Every day she talks to her, Mrs. Adeeb, you did this to me, this to that. So it's trust and everything, what have you, but try to understand them. Reach out to them. And everybody is good. Bring the goodness in them.
I'm reminded of the word of Rabbi Abraham Heschel, who with Martin Luther King said, I pray with my feet. And when we walk into places of tension and hurt and pain and go into that, our walking is our praying for a solution.
I want to thank you for your heart and participation, for not only being in the room, but bringing all of yourself in. I know that we have here tonight people in the Jewish, Muslim, Christian, and Sikh traditions, Buddhist. Are there any other religious or faith traditions represented here? Well, we did pretty well. What I would like for each one of you to do is find somebody tomorrow and tell them about this experience you had and the conversations you had. Every time we talk about opening ourselves up to understand an other, it helps the next person do the same thing, and we can gradually begin to make a change. Any last words, Rabbi Cohen?
Well, you started with a prayer, so I'll end with a prayer. Everyone doesn't have to necessarily close their eyes, but I do believe that tonight we truly experienced the fact that every human being is created in the image of God. Everyone has within them a divine spark. I mean, I truly believe that it's significant that on 9/11 we are recognizing that common spark. When we see the spark in others, others will see that spark in us. And I hope and pray that we have the courage to realize the deepest aspirations of our souls, to have the strength of spirit, to be resolute, to live from these inspiring and awakening moments in our lives. And hopefully in this way, as we pray that God, who makes peace above, should hopefully, through that sense of seeing the spark in all humanity, create peace among all of us. And let us say, Amen.